All righty. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live presentation hosted by the Positive Psychology Coaching and Diversity Institute, where we believe that we can bring meaningful changes into organizations through positive psychology and coaching. My name is Coach Marcella Mapp. I am one of the coaches, leadership and diversity coaches here at PCADI. And today I have on with me, go ahead and introduce yourself, Heather. Heather, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, you're still breaking up.
Oh,
So
no.
my name's Heather Hall, and I'm a leadership coach with PCADI.
Wonderful. And we have...
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Costello. I'm also a leadership coach with PCADI, in addition to a positive psychology coach and a chiropractor.
Wonderful. And I'm so happy to have both of you ladies here with us today as we are coming in to talk about a very important topic, and that is acceptance. I know it sounds kind of strange for some of you guys to think about acceptance and how it relates to positive psychology and workplace coaching, but I can guarantee you that it is definitely relevant, and we're going to work into that today, talking about acceptance versus agreement and how we can use acceptance to make meaningful changes in our workplace. Sounds good? Mm-hmm. Good. Now, Heather, you said that you had some trouble hearing me. Can you hear me better now?
Marcella, I think she might be reloading because I see that she went off the screen. So I think she may just be reloading so that it can solve any technical issues.
Okay. So what we'll do is we will just go a bit into what acceptance is, and we'll let Heather join us when she comes back. Okay. So acceptance is not agreement, and it does not mean that you have to like or agree with what is happening, but it does allow you to open up the possibilities. When we fight against reality, we create resistance and increase our chances of experiencing pain and suffering. So when we accept things that the way they are, we can begin to explore things in a different way and see new opportunities for growth. How important is it for us to begin to practice acceptance when we find ourselves in workplace, snafus, if you would, that aren't exactly, giving us that stability that we want to have, or giving us the fortitude that we need to push forward when things get difficult? How do you handle that? How do you use acceptance in those spaces, Kathleen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love this topic because I think, I'm just even thinking about some, the clients that I work with and some of the situations that they're encountering at work. And I think there are so many instances where things don't go how we want at work or at home in our personal life. And that this idea of how do we learn to work with acceptance really does open up more possibilities. It doesn't mean we're going to get exactly what we want, but it starts to help us decrease the resistance. And it actually takes a lot of energy to be in constant resistance to something. So when we can free up that energy, then there's more available to have creative ideas, come up with, collaborative solutions. So I think this is actually a really relevant topic for the workplace, and probably something that doesn't really get talked about a whole lot.
Right. And I mean, I can definitely agree with you, as it's something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. But when you hear acceptance, it's like, we force people to say, well, I'll just go with the flow of things. But going with the flow of things still has a bit of resistance attached to it, because it's like, where do you speak up in that? Where do you give yourself a voice to say, well, even if it's not right, I'm just going to accept it just because? That doesn't open up the door for you to have that voice that you want to be able to have in those spaces. It doesn't give you space to say that you can and you will move towards a co-created solution with the people in your workplace. It just says, I'm a part of a team. I'll be passive in my approach and I'll just let it be. And that's the agreement side of things where it's like, I'll agree, even if the plane is falling apart. But how does that help your company? How does that help the team?
Yes.
How does that help you to flourish? So, Heather, what can you hear us now? Heather, can you hear us?
I can. I changed up internet providers, and we'll see if this is better.
Okay, good. Okay, so what we were talking about was just being able to just express, what acceptance means and how it relates to how it can be used in the workplace. How does that show up for you? Heather, did you get the question?
I didn't get the question. I got the prelude. Sorry.
Oh,
Not the
okay.
question.
Sorry.
So how does that show up for me in my work?
Yes. How does acceptance work, or how is acceptance used in the workplace to like help our leaders? How do we use acceptance to help our leaders in the workplace?
Right. So one of the things that I think is really important is recognizing that we don't have to agree with everybody. That's part of what's wrong in this country. We've lost our civil discourse, right? So if we can listen and understand and accept what somebody else is saying, then we can get to understand each other, collaborate better. It's just hard if we're assuming we have to agree with everyone. That's not going to happen.
Because I mean, how boring would things be if everybody had that same opinion all the time?
Well, and Marcella, if I can jump in for just a minute,
Of
one of
course.
the things you were saying previously about kind of going with the flow, something I will point out a lot with clients is resignation. So there's a difference between acceptance and resignation. And to me, again, kind of bringing in that term energy or like the feeling of it, resignation to me has a little bit of a heavy feeling, and I think that also that often gets masked with this like, oh, it's fine, okay, I'm just going to go with the flow, like we'll just, like you said, the plane's falling apart, but I'm just going to pretend like it's all good. And really what ends up happening is I think resignation is masking the resistance. And so then other things can come out of that, right? Like passive aggressiveness, or we really aren't looking to try to find any collaborative agreements. And so I think there's an interesting level of awareness that has to come in our own experience to be able to look at acceptance and really work with it within ourselves so that we make sure that we're not falling into resignation. Because resignation, I think, can look like we're trying to be a team player, but it really often doesn't feel very good for us and probably isn't going to help produce really positive outcomes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what do organizations need? Positive outcomes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you think about that, like Kathleen, I love what you said about just being able to, have the resignation in the conversation with acceptance. What does it mean when we give ourselves the space to see change and accept the change so that there is the opportunity to have the clarity that you need to solve problems, to move forward, and to make connections with your coworkers, your employees, your higher ups? What does that mean to see change, accept it, and then work within yourself to move the needle forward without the resistance? Well, what does that mean to leaders and organizations?
I mean, great question. I think it kind of it almost comes in the other order. At least in my experience and working with folks, is that it actually starts with looking within. Noticing the narrative that we have about the situation and realizing what is causing a lack of acceptance. What is the change that we want that we're not seeing, and what is it within us that's in resistance to that? Because I think unless we're willing to look at that first and kind of deal with our inner landscape, more than likely we're going to end up just projecting things out. We may not be as collaborative as we think. And so I think a big part of it, and you said it, is like making space, that when we're in those situations, to be willing to say, hey, you know what, I'm irritable right now, I'm frustrated by this, I'm disappointed, I'm, and take a minute with ourselves to actually get clear as to why. And then I think the next piece is to see the landscape for what it is, right? To see the change or the lack of change, and then say, what is it that I need to do within myself to get to a more accepting place of this? And again, like you said at the beginning, doesn't mean I'm going to like it. And I think that's the tough part. That's what makes acceptance really hard. And believe me, I fall into this too. Acceptance is hard because it doesn't mean we're going to like it. And that's where I think that's the piece where, like, self-compassion and being okay with, like, all right, I'm going to accept that this is the reality, even though this isn't what I want. And then the other possibilities for change can happen, because again, we've done some of the inner work first. But again, that's just my 2 cents on it.
How about you, Heather? How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. One of the things is that change is inevitable. We're going to have change in our workplace, right? So one of the things, and this is not a Pollyanna approach, but one of the things that I used to do was try to find the part of that change that did help me. Sometimes we forget the part that is benefiting us because we're so frustrated with the part that changed that we didn't want, right? Another big part of this is when change is trying to get into the situation enough so that you can provide some constructive feedback, not to be a naysayer, but to provide some of your insights about how you see this working and how your insights might help in that change. Sometimes big organizational changes you can't change. They come from the top down, but a lot of the change that happens in our day to day, we have some agency over.
And I think that's really great that you would bring that up. So often we focus on the environmental change that's happening, and we think about, oh my gosh, this ship is rolling so fast. There's nothing that I can do to change what's happening around me. But you always have the power over yourself. You can control you. And I think it's when we lose that bit of control around what's going on around us that we begin to spiral and fall into those thinking traps, fall into those negative thoughts that cause us to, act, reactively. And it causes so much dysfunction across the board, and it doesn't allow us to make meaningful changes. So I love that you said what you said about being able to recognize what role we play in the cycle that might be going on around us. So that, I think that's really, really important. Really important. So my next question to you ladies is, what is the best possible outcome that can come from a situation if it does not change? If we're on the outskirts and we're looking and we're just watching things go in a way that is uncomfortable for us, what is the best possible outcome? As a leader, as someone that's a part of a team, what do you do in those situations when you know that the situation is not going to change in a favorable way? How do you step up as a leader, or how do you coach your leaders to be able to stand in those spaces?
So one of the things that I recognize is that as leaders, we've got followers that we have to support, right? So we have to find a way that we can step up and be authentic, be transparent, acknowledge this might not be the best thing now, and give folks a chance to adapt. It might mean giving people more time to work through a new change, it might be giving people new procedures or helping them build new systems that can help them through that change.
That's good. That's good. How about you, Kathleen?
Yeah, I like the question. I think helps open up perspective, right? Because there's sort of an acceptance piece built into the question. Like, if this doesn't change, what's the best possible outcome? And so often we're so focused on it changing for the best possible outcome. So I like the question because um, there's a quote that I'm going to butcher right now, but it's basically like, we get better answers when we ask better questions. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that this is one of those because it makes a perspective shift of, wait, oh, something can still come out of this, even if it's not what I originally thought would come out of it. And so, I think, and Heather said something really powerful about still focusing on what part of the change has been beneficial, whether it's for ourselves individually, or maybe maybe even something getting delayed doesn't feel good, but it might be delayed in a way that more stakeholders can come in and it can actually end up having a better result. Or maybe a project is completely overhauled because there was enough time to actually realize that it wasn't going to be as beneficial as we thought in the moment. So I really like that question because it like I said, it opens up possibilities that just because something didn't happen the way we wanted doesn't mean there's not still a possibility for positive change.
Absolutely. Something I want to, bring up briefly here, at the Positive Psychology Coaching and Diversity Institute, we always like to bring light to different positive psychology concepts. And one that kind of lands here, rightfully so, is ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. It's an approach to dealing with difficult thoughts and emotions and memories and sensations. And one of the things that it can kind of combat is workplace stress, because oftentimes we find ourselves in places, or we find ourselves in situations where we've experienced a really maybe difficult boss, or we've experienced a really difficult transition at one job that we had once before. And if we find ourselves in a situation where things begin to look similar, or they begin to feel similar, it has an adverse effect on our emotions and our behaviors. So could you see a way for your leaders, if they were, going through a difficult situation at work, if they needed to be able to practice ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, to be able to work their way through their difficult situations by practicing acceptance, choosing and committing to a value direction that helps them to make changes, and then committing to those changes by taking action. It's a quick little acronym that, I like to reference, where A stands for accept, C stands for choosing the direction, and T stands for taking action. And ACT is one of those things that definitely comes up because who doesn't have stress at work from time to time?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to accept and see how that big project is having an effect on not only myself, but if I reframe this thing and I see that it's not only having an effect on me, it's having an effect on my entire team, I'm then able to open up that door and communicate with others on my team and say, hey, let's have a conversation about this, not from a frustrated point of view, but from a point of view where we can work together and cultivate something that changes the way that we see the way that we're functioning together in our team. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So have you ever heard of acceptance and commitment therapy being used in the workplace to help leaders and help people to just overcome stress and adversity when those, thoughts and emotions start to come to the surface?
I don't know that I've heard of it specifically in the workplace, though I think it would be amazing
Mm-hmm.
if there were ACT trainings for workplace situations. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the big piece, right? So when we get to a place of acceptance, and I even say, like, we may not be in a place of full acceptance, but if we can get to even a little bit of acceptance, that's good, right? Like, it's not like all of a sudden we're going to have this euphoric moment where we're like, you know what, I get it, it's okay, like everything's gonna be fine, like it's okay if we don't get there, but a little bit of acceptance opens up the possibility to then, like you said, commit and then take action. And I think one of the words that you mentioned in there is values, Marcella. And, you know, that's another thing that we talk a lot about in PCADI is really identifying what our values are. And I think sometimes when we're dealing with challenges in the workplace, whether it's on an organizational level or just with another individual, it's often a values difference. It doesn't mean that one person's value is better than the other. I give this analogy a lot. You know, if one of us values kindness and another person values efficiency, our interactions may look very different. You know, the person who values kindness may be a little warmer, may kind of soften the edges of things, but the person who values efficiency may have very direct, short conversations because that's what they value. And then there can become a challenge between these two people, not because they're not both good people or they're important values, but they can't see that they're coming at it in a different way. And so I want to give that analogy because I think when we can get in touch with our values, it can make it easier to commit to actions that are important to us. And so back to the kindness piece, if I value kindness and something's not going how I want in the company, I can still commit to showing up to people who I may disagree with or in meetings from a kind place because I'm committing to that value, even if I know I'm going to be challenged in those situations. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. It does. And Heather, I know you have some experience in working with like cross-functional teams and making sure that teams are able to, you know, work together and be able to bridge those gaps when it comes to communication. Share with the people how that shows up when using acceptance.
Yeah, I think in cross-functional teams, it's especially important to have the communication. I'm going to pop back for 1 second, though. When you described that acronym and you said take action, one of the things that really struck me is on a day-to-day basis, we get frustrated about things, and what we're thinking inside in that mental spiral is, I can't change.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Cliffhanger.
Oh no, right in the middle. Oh boy, let's see.
Heather will be back. It's okay. We'll just all wait with, you know, bated breath until we hear her.
There she is. There she is. There she is. Hey.
Heather, we were just saying that was a good cliffhanger. You were like, you had us all on the edge of our seat.
I'm sorry. That was my goal, to have you on the edge of your seat. What I was going to say was, when we think we about it, that's just a negative spiral. And when we recognize there's something that we can do, even in a personal situation, you know, often with my best friend, I'll recognize that she's getting something. And in that frustration, recognize that she's not able to do anything. And I'll suggest, well, why don't you clean the kitchen cabinets or clean out the fridge or clean the closet? And the reason for that is just that function of having something that you, some action that you can control can be so liberating. It can give you that sense of momentum, even though it's not necessarily solving the problem, but the problem in a different perspective, then.
Oh no. Come back, Heather. Come back. Come back, Heather.
I'll just chime in though. I love what Heather is saying because I think that is a huge part of it is we don't like feeling like something's outside of our control or we don't like feeling like we don't have a say. So I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Heather, did you have some final thoughts on that? It just cut out for a minute.
You got it. You got it. You know, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, and especially when you're the leader, having the ability to take some action towards, implementing the new change or supporting the new change, something that is positive momentum, forward momentum, that can make a huge difference in the team morale.
Mm. So when it comes to making changes, what do you think is the responsibility of the leader of a team, the head honcho of a team, the CEO of an organization, to help create that language for acceptance, to help create that momentum for acceptance so that it doesn't create more resistance from the team? What do you think is the responsibility of a leader in those spaces to be present and have, you know, kind of show what it is that they want? What's the responsibility of a leader when those kind of changes happen?
I'll give it a shot. So,
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. Give her a second. Give her a second. She's coming around town.
Little did our audience know that we're doing this to keep them engaged and wondering what's going to be said next.
It's a game we like to play.
That's right. That's right. All the little different ways to keep our audience engaged.
Right. Exactly. Go ahead, Heather.
So, wasting no time. So what I was going to say was, and I think we talked about communication earlier, the thing that often happens in a change situation, whether it's an HR policy or a big overall change, a new system change, the folks that are higher up in the organization feel like they've talked about it for months. And then we roll it out and we don't give the staff all of that understanding of why. Not that you need to stop everything and placate people, but there's a whole bunch of thought that went into this change, whatever the change is. And so giving the staff that understanding of why that change was made and giving them that communication in multiple ways can really help people get on board with something. They feel like they have a better understanding of why it's being done and how it's going to impact everybody, and especially the customers.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. It's
Well,
about being able to assess the impact. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, well, and I think I know prior to this conversation, we were having some communication back and forth. And I think one of the things that had come up too was around communication and that being such an important part of this process. And as Heather said, on one hand, it's making sure that employees or stakeholders at least are in the know somewhat to the process. And I think also it's about allowing voices to be heard. And so I think that when maybe there are frustrations, whether it's on a team or kind of in an organization as a whole, creating safe spaces where people can voice their opinion or their thoughts, because actually what can come from that are some creative solutions. I think sometimes there's a fear that, if we open up the floor and just let people say whatever they want to say, it's just going to be negative and unproductive. But I think if it's facilitated in a positive way, letting people actually share their concerns or their thoughts can actually create kind of the fertilizer, so to speak, for other ideas to blossom out of.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that
And
process,
I think something. Go ahead, Heather. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the process that you're talking about is collaboration and consensus building. And both of those give people a chance to feel like they're part of the process, not part of the problem.
Which goes back to the point that you were making about wanting to feel like we have some control. So if we're even able to interject a little bit or feel like our ideas may be facilitating a little bit of change, I think that can make a huge difference for people.
A little bit of change. I think that. Absolutely. And I think with where we are now in a lot of organizations, thinking about having the conversation of, do we go back into the workplace? Everybody's been working at home for, over a year in a lot of spaces. Do we go back full time? Do we go back part time? Do we force everybody to come back? And it's like giving the organizations the opportunity to really assess and collaborate with their employees and say, well, has it really been working? Everybody being able to work from the comfort of their own home. What is it that we're lacking? What is it that we're missing? Let's get some feedback from our people. Maybe they want to come back. Maybe they don't want to come back. But it's an opportunity to have a conversation and accept that your company didn't go under while everybody was working from home. Everybody was still able to be productive. They were able to do these things. But here's an opportunity for you to say what the company wants. But it's also a good opportunity for you to ask your employees what it is that they want, creating the opportunity for communication, connection, and co-creating something where, I hear clients say, well, it's not mandatory for me to go back into the office, but I go in for these 2 days a week because it's good for me, it's good for the team, this and that. They're able to have that flexibility where they're able to accept, I can still get work done at home, but I still know there's some elements of my job that I want to be able to take back into the office. So does that kind of speak to that opportunity that you guys are speaking on, of being able to co-create something, to be able to communicate around something that's meaningful to organizations in like this present day?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of where there could be differing opinions on a subject like that. Upper management may have certain goals they're trying to achieve that maybe don't feel like they're in line with that, but the employee base has really benefited from some of the flexibility of a work from home situation. And so you could see again how there might be some values differences. And unless everybody has a chance to bring those up or identify them together, that could definitely cause some conflict and probably a lot of misunderstanding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know I do appreciate the good opportunity to work from home. It's nice. It's very nice. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marcella,
It's a great opportunity for experimentation too. I mean, we've worked in the workplace for decades. So this idea of working from home under all the restrictions that we had in 2020, it requires a little bit more experimentation. It's not a flip the switch kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And
Yeah, and
some
Marcella,
people, they say no, and bring them back. Go ahead, Kathleen.
I was just thinking that maybe this is a good opportunity. I don't want to shift the agenda, but if this might be a good opportunity to talk about a few instances that we may have experienced individually as on our own, or maybe I know Heather has a wealth of experience working in organizations. Like, where have you seen these practices, communication or educating? Where have you seen that positively impact what may have been a challenging situation? I'm curious if any of us have any stories that we might be able to illustrate.
Well, in a
Go ahead,
corporate
Heather.
setting, in a group setting, one of the things that we did in the organization that I used to work in was lean. It's a continuous improvement process.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Well, we know
She's
she'll be
still
back.
here.
I'm actually really excited to hear about this. Yeah, Heather had mentioned a little bit about this process, and so I was curious to hear a little bit more about it. So.
Okay, wait. It seems like she's coming back. There she goes. There she goes. I think she knows. There it is. Hey, girl. There you go. Go ahead, Heather. Let us know a little bit more about the process. Go ahead, Heather. Mm-mm.
I just sent a chat just in case that was easier.
Oh, okay. Wait, something happened again. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll share mine, Kathleen, and we'll
Perfect.
we'll give Heather a chance to come on back in. One of the ways that I think this shows up, and I know it's kind of far fetched, but I think it's one of the biggest organizations that I think we all can kind of identify with. It's like churches. I think religion in general has made a very major shift over the years where it's like, do we fold to what's new and edgy to reach more people, or do we stay on the clear and traditional to just keep the standard alive? And I think the churches who given themselves the opportunity to evolve and accept that their environment was changing, so the people and the congregation were changing, ultimately gave them more space to grow
Mhm.
and reach more people, see more people in organizations. And I think, on an organizational level, when you think about, different organizations who cater to the diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to hiring people, not just what people look like, who people are on paper, but who people are when they show up. I think that's a really big thing that can cater to acceptance being more than just a word, but more of an action in the workplace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great example. And that's a great example of where change probably felt uncomfortable for a lot of those folks, but it may have actually been really necessary for more forward momentum.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Go ahead, Heather.
Y'all are so patient. I do not know what's going on. Um, so going back to that question about lean as a continuous improvement process, one of the things that you're doing in lean is bringing the staff together to solve a problem. So that's where one of the biggest places where I worked with cross-functional teams, bringing people in that have different perspectives on whatever the problem is that you're trying to solve, whether it's a faster turnaround time or a better way to build a widget, bringing people together and giving them these tools to collaborate, to brainstorm. We don't do brainstorming in our businesses most of the time. Somebody has an idea, somebody says, let's brainstorm. That person says their idea again, and we kind of stop. Whereas brainstorming, when we really bring up all the ideas and then vet them, it's not one specific solution that's been brought up. It's usually a combination or, twisting this with that we build a better system, whatever it is we're building or providing for our clients. So in that lean exercise, you're bringing people together to look at things that they work with or they're impacted by. They're either upstream or downstream of the process, and they get a chance to bring all of their observations. They're all heard. So that's a situation where you can't have any one person be the solution. You have to come together as a team and really collaborate. And so I find that kind of work really exciting. And it's a great example of acceptance over agreement. We don't all have to see the same. We don't all have to think it's the same way. But we do have to come together and accept that we have different points of view, different experiences, and learn from them.
Mm-hmm. That's
Mm,
great. Well, thank you,
absolutely.
because you actually both helped trigger. I was trying to go through my Rolodex of memories in my brain, and I was like, oh, no, I have to have some examples of this. And I'm so sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. I'll just give a quick example of where I think, again, this communication and collaboration worked well. I worked years ago for a financial services company, and we were going to be implementing some changes that would affect our call center employees, how they would be interacting when customers would call in, specifically around the scripting that they would use. And I was so low on the corporate totem pole at that point. So this definitely wasn't my idea. At least I don't think so. This is like 12 years ago. But we had the idea that we should actually go out and do focus groups with some groups of employees at these call centers to get a better idea of what their experience is, how they think the scripting would work with customers, any kind of obstacles that they could identify. And I think that was so helpful. I mean, we actually flew out to the call centers for a day, did the focus groups, flew back, and it was, now that I look back at it, that was really proactive, because I think a lot of times in organizations, there can just be this top down approach, right? There's a change that needs to be made. Certain management levels make the decision, and then it gets implemented by, the employees kind of, lower in the hierarchy, so to speak. And their input doesn't get, there's no room for their input. And then they're the ones that are dealing with the ramifications of these decisions. And so I think that's also really powerful when we can bring in more voices, because again, we can understand each other better, we can have better process improvements. And again, people feel like they're supporting the progress and change for the organization.
Definitely.
Oh, Marcella, you're muted.
I see that. You want people to feel like they are part of the process. You want people to feel like they have a stake in the game. You want your employees to know that their word and their actions are valued, and they're not just coming to work and showing up and going home. It matters. And when employees can see that from the top down, they have a better opportunity to feel connected to the company and invested in the mission and the things that you have to do, even if it comes with a bushel of changes that they have to do on their end.
Absolutely.
That's good. That's really good. I love it. I love it. Okay. So as we are coming up on our time here today, when it comes to acceptance versus agreement, how can acceptance begin to change the way that we make changes or go through changes in the workplace?
Well, I think inherent in that question is, and I know we're kind of maybe coming back around to things we've said, but I think what's inherent is that agreement isn't necessary, right? That's not a requirement for things to still move forward. And that's why I love the quote, agree to disagree. And I think sometimes being even transparent in conversations, like, okay, we're probably not going to completely see eye to eye on this, right? But how do we still move forward in spite of that? Because I think sometimes getting really hung up on the fact that everybody has to buy in actually will just delay the process. And it may be okay, how would this look in your ideal scenario? How would this look in your ideal scenario? How would this look in yours? And then how do we find, is there some common ground there? There's similar themes that we can start to pull from? But yeah, I think the big thing is that it's okay if everybody doesn't actually agree with each other.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good takeaway. How about you, Heather?
Yeah, the thing that comes to my mind as you ask the question, I was kind of imagining the willow tree. When we're rigid in our viewpoint and we're like our way or the highway, then we're not going to be very flexible. But as we think about the willow tree, it's able to change and bend with the wind as it moves around. And so for us to get out of that spiral thinking, to get out of that negative mindset and really an adversarial role. If we can accept things and find our new place in that, find the thing that works best for us, we're going to be much happier, which is really what we want, right? We want to be happy ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to around to what you were saying first. What can I change about me? Like, what's the me in this scenario? Not so much of what's going on around me or what's required from somebody else. For me, when it comes to acceptance, I can't help but think about, the prayer that people pray for when they're in
Oh,
AA. Lord, give
the serenity
strength
prayer.
to accept the things, well, the serenity prayer, to accept the things that I cannot change the things that I can, and all that good stuff. I think it's such a powerful prayer because it again turns the mirror back on me. I'm not going to continue to look outward and expect others to know how to make me feel comfortable in this change. I'm going to do the work for myself. I'm going to see what role I play in this scenario and in this situation that I can make it better. And from doing that, I know ultimately I'll get the success that I want. I know ultimately I'll get the worth that I want from this, and I'll be able to grow from this. So when it comes to being able to practice acceptance versus agreement in the workplace, I think we do ourselves a great service when we learn to speak up when it matters, but also when we give ourselves the space to say, I don't have to agree with you, but we can try out and we can still move this needle forward for the good of the team. And we can still make the right kind of changes that help the team to grow, that help the company, the organization to move forward. So I think that's where not organization, agreement and acceptance kind of meets in the road for me after our discussion today.
I love that, Marcella. And I'll just share that, one of my favorite questions to ask clients and ask myself is, what would feel like a success out of this situation? And really not from an outcome standpoint, kind of on the bigger picture, but for ourselves. And I think what you're saying is really pointing it back at being our own measure of success, because that's really all we have control over. And so, in going into, let's say, maybe a difficult dialogue, it's what will I feel successful if I leave? Like, if it that I was respectful? Was it that I shared these particular points? Was it that I could really hear the other person, so that no matter how the situation goes, right? Because we can't control the outcome, particularly when other individuals are involved. But if we can be our own measure of success and our own barometer of what feels good, we can step away from even really difficult situations, feelings like we showed up the way we wanted to. That doesn't mean we'll get what we
Absolutely.
want, as we've said over and over, but if we can, at the end of the day, say, hey, you know what? I showed up in the way that I wanted, and I can feel good about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you
being
brought that
able
back to
to
values.
control. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, ladies, before we close out today, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the people before I give them the great spiel about all the great things we have going on over here at the Peak Caddy?
I'll just add
Anybody?
that,
Anybody?
and you all, not to bring up a new topic, but you all know that I do improv and I lead groups in improv exercises. So this comes down to a yes and perspective, that first rule of improv that says, I'm going to acknowledge what you said and I'm going to build upon that, which is a great way to live.
Absolutely.
I love that, Heather.
Thank
And
you.
I'll just chime in and say acceptance isn't easy. I just want to remind folks of that. We can talk about it quite a bit, and I think we've all experienced in our own life. So to just be gentle with yourself, and, again, a little bit of acceptance is better than none. And it doesn't mean you have to be completely, at peace with the whole situation in order to get to that yes and, as Heather said, we just need a little bit of acceptance to open the door for other possibilities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And learning the differences between acceptance and agreement, because
Mhm.
it will change the way that you accept the changes in your workplace and in your life. So that is all we have for you good people today. I do hope that you will continue to follow, continue to be a part of the conversation of what we have going on here at the Positive Psychology Coaching and Diversity Institute. You can always check us out on YouTube. You can check us out in LinkedIn and on Instagram, all Peak Hattie. And you can even go to our website and learn a little bit more about our services and things that we offer. We offer coaching services, we offer diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, and we also have a really great program called the Positively Diverse Leader. This PDL is helping leaders to become coach-like leaders through the lens and helping them to open up and reframe their mindset around DE&I topics. So we do hope that you will join us. We hope that you will subscribe to our channels and join our conversations, our LinkedIn lives. We have these every month, and there's a different topic, and most of the time different panelists each month, where we just break down different things that are important to us here at the Positive Psychology Coaching and Diversity Institute. My name is Coach Marcella Mapp, and I am here with Dr. Kathleen Castillo and Coach Heather Hall. And it has been our pleasure today to speak with you on this important topic that is acceptance versus agreement. We'll see you next month. That's all for now. Bye.
Bye, everyone.